Episode 12, No Hipsters Pod. It's your host, Ronce, the founder of NoHipstersAllowed.com. And this week we have our very first transatlantic show. Our co-host is my good friend and founder of The Now List, Khadija Robinson.
Hey, what's up?
Thank you for joining us. Actually, you were the very first co-host of the podcast, so welcome back. It's a homecoming for you.
A homecoming that is virtual because I am clearly still overseas.
Right. So you've been in Nigeria since March?
Yes, 11 weeks today.
In staying away from the U.S., not only have you avoided the pandemic, but you've avoided civil unrest that has been going on for 9 days now. As you've probably seen in the news, Minneapolis man, George Floyd, was killed by the Minneapolis Police Department. There's a video out there. You said that you haven't watched it, and I don't blame you. But just for the listeners, it's an almost 10-minute video, and it shows an officer, Derek Chauvin, placing his knee on George Floyd's neck for about 8 minutes and 30 seconds. Actually, it's 8 minutes and 46 seconds, I believe. There are no words to explain watching that. I'm still kind of shaken by it, even though after all this time. And Derek Chauvin has been arrested. Has since been charged with third-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter. So first of all, I just want to hear your thoughts on the killing of George Floyd and also on the charges and whether or not those charges are appropriate.
Yes. So like you said, I have not watched this video. I think there's a good number of us now who just have reached our capacity in terms of watching Black people be murdered on camera. It is it's a very mentally taxing thing to deal with on such a regular basis, it seems like. And it's so interesting because I remember very distinctly the first time I ever saw a Black person be murdered on camera. That was Oscar Grant. And I was in college and someone pulled the video up while I was in the library studying. And I think I watched that video at least 100 times because I could not understand what I was watching, even though it was very clear that I was watching someone be shot in the back and killed by a police officer. I just couldn't, at that time, my mind could not really process that someone was being executed for literally no good reason. And I think back to that, like that very first time, watching it over and over and over again and still not understanding what the hell I was watching, to now when I just don't even, like, I just don't watch. I think the last video, I didn't watch the video from Georgia. I didn't watch, I can't engage like that anymore with these kind of videos. And it's, so the killing, it is, his murder is not surprising to me. I think that's the saddest part about it, that I remember the first time that I watched one of these videos, and it's since then become so prevalent, it feels like, that as soon as I see something about another murder on social media, I'm not even shocked.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. It's life in America. It's something different.
It truly is. It truly is. And so, like I mentioned, third-degree murder, a lot of people are saying that they could have gone for first degree. I mean, I personally think maybe second was probably more feasible. I think first might be a stretch. But as a lawyer, what do you think? What's your legal opinion on that?
So the degree of murder has to do with the intent that the perpetrator had at the time of the act. And it's always hard for me as a lawyer and as a Black person and Black attorney to really think critically about these cases, because to me, just looking at the still shots that I've seen of that video and listening to people's description of the video, I think, well, this man was murdered and you clearly had intent to murder him, an intent to kill him when you committed an act for such a long period of time, despite his cries that he could not breathe, which means you are killing him.
Right.
But then I also think about where we live. We live in America. And in America, white people will find any possible reason to excuse, explain, or otherwise allow the blatantly criminal and racist behavior of police and of the society in general. So when you think about what you can prove and what a jury might think when you present them with the evidence that you believe you have on hand, you have to take that into account. And just knowing the America that we live in, knowing how hard it is to even get a grand jury to indict police officers on charges of murder or manslaughter or assault, even for any of the fucked up shit that they do, you know, for lack of better language. That's something that you have to consider when you are deciding how to bring charges. Now, charges can be upgraded, charges can be downgraded. Right. Now, one thing I will say is, when you bring charges of murder, a jury can find someone guilty of lesser included charges, which means that if the prosecutor had chosen to bring charges of first degree murder, a jury might find at the end of a trial that a defendant was not guilty of first degree murder, but was guilty of third degree murder. But here you don't have the option for that because you've already brought the lesser charge. So it is.
So I guess what you're saying is that there's a strategic advantage to actually going for the higher charge, is what you're saying?
There is a strategic advantage to going for the higher charge, potentially, but there's also there can be a disadvantage. Your jury might just say, nope, didn't have this intent, not guilty, and might not adequately consider a lesser included charge. Your jury might be, as many juries are in America, and might end up being less than optimally racially balanced and more likely to view facts in a certain biased way than they would be otherwise. It is, I'm not a prosecutor for a reason, probably first and foremost of which because I believe we need to abolish prisons, but, whatever. It's probably the main reason I'm not a prosecutor.
Right. You know what? I have to thank you because in your last appearance, you explained the whole prison abolition thing, and I have a better understanding because of you. And I do agree with all the, the premise of the movement. But I wonder if sometimes if it would benefit from different branding. And I say this at the risk of sounding like those people who say, yeah, I'm not into feminism, I'm into equality. Like, I know I sound like those people right now, but the fact of the matter is that the words prison, abolishment, it just on its face sounds like you're saying something else. Don't you agree?
Yes and no. And this is why I say yes and no. So yes, people get the wrong idea when you say prison abolition. People are like, you just want to tear down all the prisons and let everybody go free and wreak havoc on society. And no, that is not the case. The vast majority of prison abolitionists, if not all of prison abolitionists, will tell you that they still believe that for those people who are dangerous to society and who we believe will inflict harm on others if they're not segregated from society. We do still believe in the segregation of those people. However, prison is as much a reality in America as it is an ideology. The idea that we have of prison, the way that our prisons function, the way that we view people immediately who enter into a prison, they are criminals, they're felons, they're animals, they're monsters, they're thugs. The way that we immediately dehumanize them, the way we just throw them away and lock up the key. And even when there's a pandemic where they literally cannot protect themselves, where they are being held on top of one another, have no soap, have no access to face masks, have no access to protective measures. And this is a deadly virus or a deadly, infection that's going around the country, and around the world, that people are literally holed up in their houses and scared to touch one another over. We literally have dehumanized our prison population so much that we just don't give a fuck if they all die. And we're leaving them in there to die. We would rather leave people in there and let them die, which people have in prison already from COVID, than potentially confront the possibility that the way that we've been viewing our prison population as less than human is in itself fucked up and reflects more on our humanity than it does on theirs. And the way that we think about our criminal justice system, we think automatically if someone is convicted of something, they must have done it. Although we know that our system is very influenced by race, and we have had countless number of people's convictions overturned because of faulty evidence, because of witnesses that have lied, because of new DNA evidence that's come out, people who were on death row whose cases have been overturned. So despite consistent contrary evidence, consistent evidence about police brutality, for some reason, we still believe that every person that was arrested by someone like Derek Chauvin and locked up, and when Derek came to testify that they did whatever he said they did, he was believed and they were convicted, and now they're in prison. And even though we see the evidence that this man is a fucking racist monster, we are not going back to review all of his cases where he was a primary witness. And all of those people are still in prison, and they're all still being exposed to a prison system where people literally die on a regular basis. Why is that? Why are we able to look at people being murdered in the street by police officers and we recognize that they are humans, and that sparks a worldwide movement, but we can't look at the people who've already been in prison by those same men and women, the same people who are kneeling on folks' necks and murdering them or shooting them in the backs, like a Michael Scott. The same people are, sometimes they are one of the only witnesses in a case. And we can't look at those instances where they have been a direct contributor to someone's imprisonment and use the same critical lens for those cases. And we automatically assume the same way that our larger society assumes when someone is being arrested for whatever reason, that they automatically did whatever they were being arrested for. Right. We automatically assume those people are just criminals, so fuck them.
Right. Right. Actually, it's one of the reasons why I believe it might be France. Well, some European country, they actually don't allow perp walks because I think they think it creates an impression just by people seeing someone in cuffs. So, yeah.
And not only do we allow perp walks, but we allow shows like Cops, where you're literally being arrested on primetime television. Right. Because for some reason, people in America would like to go on ride-alongs with racist police officers from our living room.
Yeah, actually, I've always thought Cops was just inhumane, but that will be it for some other show where we discuss just how ridiculous that show is.
Not to mention, when anyone wants some expert advice on the law, no one ever calls a goddamn police officer and has them come and opine on what the law is. You call a lawyer. And anytime you hear a podcast like this or a show or something where people want someone to come opine on the law, they have a legal professor, they have a practicing attorney, they have a state's attorney or prosecutor or someone. No one ever is calling Joe Blow officer to come give his opinion on the law, yet those police officers are the first line of our criminal justice system, and they are the ones who are on the streets every day applying the law to human beings. And I don't understand it.
Well, that's a bar right there. I never considered that.
Not to mention, a lot of these police officers do not even have to have a college degree. So you might be having the law applied to you by somebody who has a high school diploma, and that's it.
Let's talk about the protests and how it looks like we're looking at billions of dollars in damage since the video went viral of George Floyd's murder. And there are lots of different opinions about how people are handling it. I have mixed feelings about it. On one end, I do think that violent protest is really what gets people's attention. I do think that when you live in a capitalist society where people just care more about stuff, no one's listening until you destroy stuff. And I also I think that this is a culmination of a variety of things. It's the murder of George Floyd and murder of like other, unarmed Black people. But it's also just a system that keeps everyone under, a proverbial need, in terms of access to healthcare, in terms of, housing, and just a variety of things. And I think that's what the anger really is. And that's why we're seeing this kind of rebellion. And so I get that. I get all of that. But on the other hand, I also know that there is collateral damage. And I guess one argument could be like these types of things always have collateral damage. And, some people believe that it is justified. But, I just think it's easier to point from afar and say, you know what, this is what needs to happen. But I'm sure for everyone who might not necessarily be a millionaire or billionaire and just happen to find a way to own something and to see their bread and butter, their life's work just be destroyed because of something that doesn't directly have anything to do with them. I'm sure that has to be painful. And so, I'm not here crying about a Target being burned. It's unfortunate, but that's Target, right? It's a $1 billion company. But I know that there are mom and pop stores who have been in the crossfires of what's happening right now. So I just want to know what your thoughts were on this.
Oh, yeah. This is a really hot topic and one that I've had a series of arguments about recently. I think, how much damage did you say? Billions of dollars or $1 billion of damage?
No, they're saying, there's no, because it's still happening. So no one has actually put a number on it. So, but we're talking about the Target building. It's a really big Target in Minneapolis was burnt to the ground. I think it was a 6-story apartment building still being constructed in Minneapolis, burnt to the ground. New police precinct burnt to the ground. And this is all in Minneapolis alone. And then you have DC where the St. John's Church was not burnt to the ground, but had a lot of fire damage. Other buildings across the city broken into. I believe the city center stores were broken into. Right. Got them some Louis and Prada and shit. Actually, in Atlanta, they did a lot of that, and which I'm not mad at that.
Well, I will ask this for everybody who was talking about the amount of damage that's been wrought in cities across America. Have any of them similarly discussed the amount of damage that has been wrought on Black America? Let's just labor alone. Can we calculate the amount of money that would be owed to Black Americans for their unpaid labor just during slavery? Like, how much is that worth?
Funny. So when I was in college, there was a conservative calculation that was done in one of my classes, and it brought it up to 22 trillion. And actually, funny enough, Bob Johnson, the founder of BET, took the moment to bring up reparations, and I think the figure he ended up with was 14 trillion. I actually, if there was ever a time to talk about reparations, now is the time.
And I'm not talking about reparations. I'm not even talking about reparations, because reparations would mean our property that was looted and stolen from us once we actually were able to acquire property. Because, mind you, Black people outside of slavery have been under a reign of racist terrorism in the country for decades and decades. And so part of that reign of terrorism was destroying Black homes, destroying Black businesses, murdering Black landowners, or forcing them to give up their property, forcing them to give up their movable property. Literally murdering them. So not even talking about the worth of our lives when we've been murdered, not even talking about our land that has been stolen or that we've been bullied out of somehow, not even talking about our businesses that have been burned when white people have rioted or looted or lynched or whatever they've done across the generations in order to maintain a system of racist oppression. Let's just purely talk about the actual unpaid labor of Black people during slavery. And when somebody can give me the figure for that, and when the looting damage reaches that number, then maybe we can talk. And I make this point every single time I have this discussion. I'll say it again. Every single thing that the descendants of slave owners and colonizers have in the United States of America was looted. It was either extracted from Black labor unwillingly, or it was stolen from Native Americans who were then murdered. So it's literally all looted. And I can't be upset at people who are just flat out angry, even if they can't articulate that same point, because I've had this conversation with people who say, well, these people don't even know why they're looting. They just want to get a new Gucci bag. And I'm like, maybe that's true. Maybe all they want is a new Gucci bag, and they don't know, they can't articulate with the same vocabulary as someone who went to Harvard Law School why they are doing what they're doing. But there is a baseline anger of Black people who are born in America, whose families are born in America, who come from a lineage of folks who have been downtrodden and oppressed, murdered, raped, pillaged, looted, and plundered for generations. It's almost genetic at this point. You just have a baseline anger in you at what is going on still to this day. And so even if they can't articulate that anger and they can't articulate why they feel that, it's something that is very familiar to so many Black people in America, because it's deeper than just police violence. It's deeper than just, watching videos of people being murdered on social media. It's about, looking at the disparity in home ownership and looking at the disparity in our businesses, looking at the disparity in jobs, looking at even what's like the immediate stimulus, support. Where's this funding going? Looking at the mass incarceration system, which at one point was literally almost a 1-for-1 replacement for slavery, because police departments and sheriff's departments, when they wanted to round up some free labor, would just go arrest some Negroes for whatever loitering. throw, and throw them in jail and put them on a chain gang. So you have people who might not be able to explain the full historical context, but they can tell you that when they look at their life and when they look at the opportunities that they have and when they look at where they live and what they are feasibly able to do in their life and in their trajectory, and then they look at their white counterpart in America or even their other non-Black counterpart in America, they see the disparity and the differences, even though they are the reason that our country has flourished in the way that it has and has built the wealth that it has and has the position it has in the world. Yeah, they're angry. And so right now, when that anger boils over and they go break down a Gucci store, oh, well, fuck that Gucci store, because you know what? The owners of that Gucci store and the owners of Gucci and the owners of these high-end brands and the owners of a lot of these corporations have almost guaranteed to have benefited from this same system of racial oppression that has planted that seed of anger in that person that's breaking that window. And even the mom and pop stores. Now, it's a little bit different when you're talking about Black-owned businesses, but when you're talking about small businesses in general and these mom and pop stores, a lot of these Black folks, folks might cry over a mom and pop store, but there's a lot of these small stores, a lot of these corner stores that interact with these neighborhoods on a regular basis and treat them just as inhumanely, and they are just as racist. They'll call the police on you just as frequently. They'll follow you around the store. They will call you names.
Absolutely.
They will, jack up their prices to some unconscionable level.
They will shoot you sometimes.
Yes.
There have been more than a few stories of Asian-owned stores in Black neighborhoods and shooting someone that they suspect of stealing. But however, don't you feel like there are, and I'm just still trying to, I guess, bring into focus the fact that there are some of these stores that are Black-owned, right?
There are.
No matter how small a percentage that is, some of them are Black-owned, and some of them are seeing their life's work destroyed by the riots, and so to that, what's your response to those particular people being the collateral damage to all? I mean,
you've said it yourself, collateral damage. And if you think that any uprising is going to occur and there not be collateral damage, well, you've probably never really looked at any uprising that's ever happened in history. There's always collateral damage. And I'm not saying write them off like, oh, well, it's just collateral damage, so tough luck for you, because it's right. Still, I know that has to be a terrible feeling. And I feel for those people. Right. I definitely understand that you have put your blood, sweat, and tears into something. I'm an entrepreneur as well. And not that I have a physical store, but if I did, I can imagine I'd be very upset. I own a home. I probably would be distraught if I found out that right now that my home was on fire because of looting and rioting. But at the same time, at the end of the day, at the very, 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 very end of the day, if my home got to be burnt down, my business got to be burnt down, shit got to get burnt down in order for something better to be left in the ashes when the smoke has cleared, then it got to be what it got to be. And I look at history and I look at even just the way our country functions. Our country is all about violence. It was born out of violence. It was born out of looting and rioting. It has used that tactic all around the world in order to accomplish goals. So, our country is a very violent country, both politically and then also internally. We perpetrate all sorts of violence. And so I think violence has always been, and will always be a tool for change, whether that change is social, whether it's political, whether it's economic. And here we're really kind of talking about all of them rolled into one. But if you look at, people like to point to nonviolence and peaceful protest and Martin Luther King. And I like to respond with what Martin Luther King was not able to do during his lifetime, which was a lot, as we've seen, because shit's still fucked up. But just take one thing, the Fair Housing Act, which is one of the most important pieces of legislation in our country. And it's something that has been very critical for Black and brown people, especially Black and brown people who are living in poverty or at poverty all around the country for several decades. And that's something that was a dead doorknob, could not be revived, was the most filibustered bill in history in Congress. And for all of Dr. Martin Luther King's marching and protesting, he was not able to get that pushed through. And then when he was murdered and American countries were lit on fire by angry Black people, we had that act passed in almost record time. And even if you look at what has happened in the last 2 weeks, this video recording was released. These police officers were fired and lip service was given and press conferences were held, but I did not see a single arrest occur until Minneapolis was on fucking fire.
Right. Listen, Derek Chauvin made it all the way to his vacation home in Florida.
So the same people who are talking about peaceful protesting and they're against looting and they're against rioting, well, I did not see anybody get arrested until motherfuckers was rioting and looting and shit was no longer peaceful. And even in Atlanta, we've seen some swift action for police officers there who have been, exhibiting ridiculously aggressive and sort of psychotic behaviors. And
right. I'm sure you're referring to the college students, the Morehouse and Spelman student who would be yanked out of their cars.
It's crazy, but a lot of times things get violent. Things have gotten violent. And sometimes I'm even tempted to ask, okay, if y'all are about nonviolence and peace, I'm going to just assume then that you would have rather we tried to continue to peacefully resolve the issue of slavery, the Southern question. Like, would you voluntarily, especially for Black people who are like, we can't be doing all this looting and rioting and peace and take a knee and hold hands. I'm like, okay, so would you voluntarily have had your families remain enslaved until people could peacefully come to a resolution about what to do with this question of slavery? Because I know if it were up to me, I'd be like, nah, y'all need to start this war real fast.
Right. And it's funny, like another point that I guess is pro riot is that if you're saying that someone could get murdered on camera and you wait 2-3 days to make an arrest, then the message you're sending is that this is a lawless society. And if it's a lawless society, then, I guess it's okay to burn things down. And that has been my justification of it, even though a part of me will never really sit well with seeing people lose their livelihoods in that way. But that's always been like, you know what? They waited 3 days to make an arrest despite having video evidence. And it's unfortunate. It's sad to see. It's sad that it needed to come to this, but, I guess extreme action was needed.
We have lived in a society that has been lawless for a very long time and has been extremely overly aggressive in policing others for a very long time. And so everything that you're seeing in these like times of protest and potential riot is an extension of that. None of it is surprising. It's at a certain point, you just get even tired of articulating it and talking about it because you feel like you're screaming into a void. It's very repetitive. Now, I will say that the amount of energy and the amount of outrage around the world, and not just in the US, I do think has marked this instance. And I do hear voices that I haven't heard in the past. I do think that this particular instance, I think, you and I had a conversation a few days ago about just seeing it on camera is what made it so much more impactful in this instance, because it was just so blatantly wrong and unjustified.
Yeah, right. It's on camera, it's within such close range, and it's not even like a bullet. Usually we see them shoot someone, but now you see someone's life literally just like seeping out of him like very slowly, and you're like, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe he did this in broad daylight with people begging him to stop and with people filming. Just there's a certain, it feels so evil,
And it is, and it is. And I can't speak on whether, Derek is evil. I'm going to go hazard a guess that he is.
Oh, he is.
But
mind you, he has a long record of like potential misconduct, by the way, including shooting someone in the belly, I believe, in 2008, another unarmed black man. So this guy has,
And what I'll say is that we can't get, but my only thought in terms of focusing so tightly on this police officer and his individual record is that it's so systemic and it's so widespread that we have to divorce the conversation from individual officers and divorce it from evil people and, like him being, having this history of this behavior and his sort of personal attributes to a certain extent, because at this point we've seen it repeated all over the world. I mean, not all over the world. Well, kind of actually all over the world when it comes to black people, but
to an extent, yeah.
But all over the country for so long, and it's so widespread. And it's so ingrained that we now have to start taking it out from the personal and take it to the plural and really think about what is it in terms of the people that are entering our police force, the way that the police are being indoctrinated, the powers that we give them, the oversight that we give them. So many things we have to think about and change our approach to when it comes to policing. Like, it's clearly not enough to put cameras on them because they'll kill you with the camera on and they don't care. And
and apparently they have they can turn it off and not get in trouble.
Exactly.
So in Louisville, where Breonna Taylor was killed a few months ago, some man was apparently someone who was popular locally was killed by the police, and apparently none of the officers
exactly, and I don't think any of them have been arrested or charged or disciplined yet. Outside of, I heard the police chief was fired. However, I also read that police chief was set to retire next month, so that was a largely symbolic firing. And so I think we need to take a step back from this and say, if we think that police violence is so bad that we need to put cameras on police so that we can see what they're doing, maybe we need to actually go back so many steps and think about who the fuck are we letting into the police force that we do not trust them with people's lives, and we don't trust them not to murder unless they're being watched. And even if they are being watched, they still might murder you. We need to go back and think, why do we let them have guns, period? There's a largely unarmed police force in the UK, and they don't be having the same level of problems now. They are racist too, and UK has had its number of racist incidents, like I said, around the world to a certain extent. But we have to rethink so many things about our society. This is so much deeper than just evil people making it onto the police force and not being prosecuted when they do something evil.
I wanted to talk about how we react to the unjust killings of black men versus black women. And I've seen a bit of talk about this on social media, and the knee jerk reaction for some people is to say, "Yeah, not now. Now's not the time." But I think it's always the time when it comes to things like this, and I think that it's true most of the time. But I do think that the George Floyd killing, I guess, had the benefit of coming on the heels of two other high profile killings. Number one, and also had the benefit of having video, and so that's why we're probably getting more outrage for his case versus Breonna Taylor, for instance. I just wanted to know what your take on that was.
I do think that we generally have a particular sensitivity around Black men and the police. And it's true that Black men have a very special relationship with law enforcement. And I don't think it's wholly unreasonable to focus a lot on that relationship because it's been so dangerous for Black men in this country. And it is largely born out of that viewpoint that Black men are thugs and that they are inherently dangerous. And I think there's a difference fundamentally in the way that our police force often looks at Black women versus Black men, because while they dehumanize Black women and men, but they largely will dehumanize a Black woman, it's not necessarily the same idea that this Black woman is inherently dangerous, which is a lot of the times that's the factor that will ratchet up the police violence. And right. So we see plenty of atrocities committed towards Black women by police, plenty, all the time. They are certainly not innocent when it comes to Black women. And that I think is because there is a baseline dehumanization of Black people in general. But with Black men, you have the added bonus that not only are they dehumanized, but they're viewed as inherently dangerous. And so that aggravates that sort of, and it aggrandizes that response. But I always am about amplifying the voices of women and making sure that they are not lost in the fray. And so I'm ready for somebody to get locked up for Breonna too. Like, I want to abolish prison, but I also want the police to go to prison. I'm torn. So.
All right. Well, Khadija, we could probably go on forever. Thank you for stopping by again. You always have great insight into these types of things. So before we go, please plug your social media and all of your other stuff. Your shows.
Yes. So I am the founder of The Nihilist, which is a digital platform connecting consumers to Black-owned brands online. And I think right now it's particularly timely because people are trying to shop with Black businesses and they're really trying to support our community in all sorts of ways. And supporting Black businesses is just one piece of that. And so if you're so inclined, if you're interested and curious and want to learn about different Black brands that you can shop with and maybe even grab a discount, because we got some of those on our site too, then head over to thenihilist.com. And you can also follow us across social media platforms at The Nihilist. We're on basically all of them. So, that's that for the business. And I also am, since I'm here in Nigeria, I'm highlighting brands that I have interacted with here in Nigeria. And so I do a show, Balcony Banter, usually every Wednesday and Friday. We have plenty of episodes on our website for anyone who wants to check them out, where we sit down with the founder of a different Nigerian fashion or artisanal brand and just chat with them about their brand. That has been really fun and a really great way, I think, to bridge the gap across the Atlantic and expose people to dope Black businesses that they might not have found out about previously in what I really consider to be one of the capitals of Black entrepreneurship in the world. Because I'm telling you, Nigerians are some of the most entrepreneurial people you will ever meet.
Alrighty, well, Thanks again. Episode 12, No Hipsters Pod. We'll see you next time.